It was when I was in my pediatric residency that my second child, who was my daughter, was 6 months old at the time, was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, which is a type of pediatric cancer. And I was really led during that period of my life by fear and overwhelm and guilt. I became a certified coach, and in the clinic realized the power of now being able to teach coaching tools to my patients and their families, and really saw the benefit of blending those two kind of roles that I had. And so being able to really see and embrace the belief that that challenge can be turned into a gift is so rewarding and allows us to move forward in life with purpose.
Being a parent is one of the most amazing blessings life has to offer. Well, at least I feel that way. I'm sure you do too. But we have to agree, it also comes with its ups and downs and can be a bit of an emotional roller coaster at times, especially when the unexpected happens. When our children get sick and suffer from illness, anything from the flu to cancer and everything in between, it can really throw us for a loop and lead to things like anxiety, depression, and overwhelm. And that's why I'm excited to have our special guest on today, Dr. Maureen Michele Peterson. She is a pediatrician, allergist, immunologist, and life coach and author who specializes in supporting parents of chronically ill children. She's a mother of 3 amazing children and has firsthand experience with being a parent of a child with long-term health issues. Her daughter is a pediatric neuroblastoma survivor and type 1 diabetic. Dr. Peterson will be sharing with us tips to be more resilient as parents, how to navigate and overcome feelings of overwhelm, and also access peer support to navigate these rough waters of parenthood. And she's also the author of the book Reclaiming Life, a guide for parents of chronically ill children. So, without further ado, let's meet Dr. Peterson. Hey, we're about to jump right into the content, but before we do, I wanted to let you know about 2 new products I've created for the Mental Health Toolbox. One is a set of 10 audio guided meditations on mindfulness and gratitude, and the other is a gratitude journal. It's digital and you can type right into it, or you can print it out and put it into a folder for pen to paper convenience. So be sure to check those out in the description below. All right, let's get into it. Hello, Dr. Maureen Peterson. Thank you so much for making time to be on the Mental Health Toolbox podcast today. It's such an honor and a privilege to have a pediatrician on to share words of wisdom and how we can support parents, how parents can get the support they need to prevent overwhelm and manage stress and all the anxiety that already comes from being a parent, but especially when we're dealing with children and chronic illness and cancer and everything in between. It's just a roller coaster of emotions and trials and tribulations when you're trying to navigate the waters of medical care, health, intrusive thoughts, worry, self-care, all of it, right?
All of it. No, that was a very kind and warm welcome, and I appreciate you having me on your show and allowing me the opportunity to chat with you and share my story and tips with your audience. Thank you.
Oh, it's an honor. Can't wait to deep dive in here. Perhaps you could start us off with sharing a little bit about your background, what got you into the medical field, specifically being a pediatrician, immunologist, what's it called? Allergy specialist, allergist?
Allergist, immunologist.
Allergist?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was good.
I'm still learning.
Yeah. No, so the story of getting into medicine is honestly like not very exciting. That I, as a young kid, always wanted 2 things out of life. I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to be a mom. And I can even remember, playing doctor with the neighborhood kids and dishing out little candy medicine to treat their illnesses. And I was very fortunate in life and got to achieve both of those dreams that I had as a kid. it was when I was in my pediatric residency that my second child, who was my daughter, was 6 months old at the time, was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, which is a type of pediatric cancer. They found it from feeling a lump in her belly. And when that happened, my world kind of came crashing in. I thought, you know what, like my childhood dream is going to get snatched away from me.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what it meant to have neuroblastoma because I had taken care of kids who had that same type of cancer. And I went into kind of a dark place, very, very focused on her health journey, and forgot about myself, forgot about anything else that wasn't her. And I was really led during that period of my life by fear and overwhelm and guilt and all the emotions that really made it so I wasn't living with purpose. I was living solely to be this caregiver of my daughter. Things got better with time because she did well with surgery and chemotherapy. And, you know, as time went on and we got farther away from that diagnosis, I could finally feel like I could breathe again. Then, when she was 12, I got to be the physician to diagnose her with type 1 diabetes.
Oh, double
And
whammy.
yeah,
Yeah.
in, that moment, I couldn't believe what was happening because I had felt like going through cancer was like enough. Like we checked that
Mm-hmm.
box that you can't be that unlucky to have these two bad things happen in the same lifetime. And
Must be a correlation.
there is, I'm positive of it. What that correlation is, I'm not 100% sure. Neuroblastoma in and of itself is kind of a funky type of cancer that has some immune properties to it. So the type 1 diabetes is definitely either related to the cancer or a result of the chemotherapy that
Chemo.
she got.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough to say which. I firmly believe she's not that unlucky in life to have it be unrelated. But, that her diagnosis of her having type 1 diabetes, it made me pause and realize I needed to do something for my own emotional health because I didn't want to go back to that place that I was in years earlier when she had cancer. So I was like on a mission to proactively take care of myself. I listened to podcasts, I read books, I got a coach. I really benefited from all of those things. It wasn't until a few years later that I was in a leadership position at the hospital and wanted to learn more about mentorship that I decided, you know what, I'm going to become a certified coach to mentor program directors and residents and fellows better.
This episode of the Mental Health Toolbox is brought to you by StreamYard, the easiest way to live stream and record. StreamYard is a professional live streaming and recording studio in your browser. Record your content or stream live to Facebook, YouTube, and all your favorite socials with the click of a button. If you're a content creator, then StreamYard is a game changer. StreamYard is the tool I trust to record all of my podcasts and YouTube videos. They even rolled out a new collab feature where you can find perfect guests for your podcast as well as guests on other shows you like, which is the rocket fuel for growing your podcast. They even have a built-in webinar feature to promote your courses and programs. This is usually an added feature from other providers. To check it out for yourself, visit thementalhealthtoolbox.com/StreamYard. Or just visit the link in the description.
I became a certified coach, and in the clinic, realized the power of now being able to teach coaching tools to my patients and their families, and really
Mm.
saw the benefit of blending those two kind of roles that I had. And so that has led me to the work that I'm doing today, and being incredibly passionate about helping families who have a chronically ill child. Because, like you and I were chatting about before the show, parenthood is hard, but then you
Hmm.
drop a chronic illness on top of it and it becomes devastating. And trying to make it so that others have that journey a little bit easier than I did is what drives me.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your backstory. Yeah, having a roadmap to the waters of the unimaginable, right?
Yeah.
Be that, and then we see this, this is so powerful across the spectrum of tragedies, right? Whether that be assault, whether that be any kind of trauma, whether that be cancer, your own health issues, grief, loss, and certainly parenthood is no exception when it comes to these worst case scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, yeah.
And, you bring up a great point that the things that I'm talking about today don't just apply to parents who have chronically ill kids. They do apply to them, but they also apply to everyone, because any challenge that we face in life, we really have two choices, whether that challenge be a health issue in our kid, a financial problem, a career issue. The real choice we have when we face a challenge is, do we want to curl up in a ball and allow life to happen to us? Or is our choice to really take that challenge and turn it into a gift and allow life to happen for us? So the story that I said of my life, I look at it and now look back on my daughter's cancer journey and realize that that journey, yeah, it was hard, but it really prepared me to be a great mom to a child who has a health issue that has no cure. And so being able to really see and embrace the belief that that challenge can be turned into a gift is so rewarding and allows us to move forward in life with purpose.
Wow, that's a very eloquent way to put it. Absolutely, that we have two choices, right? And ultimately, really, it's one choice: is how we react to
Yeah.
things, right? We can't control circumstances. A lot of times, things happen to us; they
Hmm.
just do. Be that our own doing, be that somebody else's doing, be that just the way the world, the universe, the cosmos, right? We can only control how we react, how
Right.
we respond, aka cope, right?
Yep.
And so what you're saying is a lot of it's mindset. It's like, how am I going to use this situation to learn, to grow, to make the most, right? To find the silver lining. But
Yeah.
that's a lot easier said than done, right?
Oh, especially in the
Yeah,
moment, right? And
sure.
and you know, I absolutely don't want your listeners to think, who's this person that is saying that, her kid has cancer, her kid has diabetes, and like, boom, it turned into a gift. Well, in the moment, it's really hard to do
Hmm.
that. And um, I would worry about someone that wasn't feeling all of these emotions like fear and guilt and overwhelm in the moment. What I want your listeners to hear, though, is with time, those emotions don't need to be the emotions that lead our life. When we're, driving our car down the journey of life, they don't need to be in the driver's seat. holding on to the steering wheel. That's our job. We can take those emotions and learn to put them into the trunk so that they're coming along for the ride, but they're not leading us in what we do. And that is an important shift that we make, not easily. And you know from all the stuff that you do that
Mhm.
it takes practice, just like anything else in life. But the very first step is really wanting it to change and having the courage to say, yes, I do need something to change, and starting that practice on shifting that mindset.
Thank you so much for touching on that, because it is a great analogy, right? That we can contain our emotions, and that's what mindfulness really is, right? It's about not repressing, not containing
Hmm.
our emotions, not pushing them away, but acknowledging them, kind of holding them here, right? While at the same time we're focused on being present. Where with a lot of grief, loss, stress, people get very stuck in their
Hmm.
emotions, right? Very lost in their emotions.
Hmm.
I'm wondering, based on your experience and the coaching you've done, what what does that look like? How does one go through the process of learning to hold their emotions without being controlled by their emotions?
Yeah. So I mean, the very first thing is really understanding and labeling how you feel,
Mm,
because you had said about that they're really trying to kind of sort out and figure out how to manage these emotions. I would say even sometimes they get repressed to
mhm,
the point where it's similar to like holding a beach ball underwater. And you hold that beach
mm.
ball, and then at some point in time you're going to have to let go of that beach ball, and that beach ball is going to come flying up out of the
Yeah.
water. And the same thing happens with emotions, that repressing them can lead to them coming out in unexpected ways. And the easiest way to describe that is when someone's stressed and they start yelling at somebody for something totally off subject. That stress is that emotion that they're feeling with stress is not being processed, it's being repressed, and they're trying to keep it under control. But their beach ball comes zinging up out of the water, and they're yelling about the TV being too loud.
Mhm,
And so the real first step is describing and labeling what you're feeling. And that can be done through things like journaling, as an opportunity to take a blank sheet of paper and just write down, like, my heart is beating fast right now. My face feels hot and flushed. My head is pounding. All of those things are symptoms of an emotion that we're feeling at the time. And until we get in touch with those types of feelings and being able to label it, we're not going to be able to really truly process emotions.
and processing these emotions is crucial, right? Because as caregivers, if we're taken down by our emotions, if we can't be present, that has a direct impact on how we can show up, right? For those we're taking care of,
Oh,
to a
yeah.
large degree, right?
And I have parents who I work with, and we talk about, fear, and they want to be strong for their child, and they want to show their child that everything's going to be okay. So what they're missing in that is, not only is it not healthy for them, but their lack of vulnerability at the time with their child is missing the opportunity to teach their child about emotions and how to process emotions.
Mm,
That if you're stoic all the time, then a kid grows up thinking it's not okay to be afraid and that it's not okay to be sad. Um, and so you raise an adult who then is going to face a challenge in their life and not know how to begin with processing emotion because you were trying to protect them, and protecting is actually doing just the opposite.
So really, even in the depths of unfortunate circumstances, we can still find teachable moments,
Oh
right,
my
for our
goodness,
children.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
model.
And yeah,
Yeah,
and our job as parents is really to teach our children. And when we talk about that, people think it's through our words and that's how we teach them. But really, it is more through our actions, functions as a teacher, that how we act, our kids are always watching us. And having those actions that are healthy to where it's showing processing of emotions or growing, and taking care of your own emotional health, or showing how to advocate for, teaches a child. So don't miss those teaching opportunities that you have as a parent.
absolutely. It reminds me of Rachel Cruz, Dave Ramsey's daughter. I know she's put out some parenting books, and I always remember what she said was, "More is caught than taught."
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
More is caught than taught. But as parents, caregivers, our job is to catch ourselves
Hmm.
when we see ourselves spiraling or becoming too like stoic as a means, coping, right, as a
Right,
means to cope, but also that what kind of message is that sending to our children, right?
right,
As
right,
if we're acting like, yeah, we just don't talk about our feelings, we don't worry, we're not afraid of anything, we just power through, and um, that processing doesn't happen, right? Or if
right,
we are processing, our children have no idea that we're processing.
right.
So yeah,
Yeah,
talking
and
about it.
and
Yeah.
the other thing that I would say is, if I can't convince them to be vulnerable in front of their
Hmm.
child and they would rather be stoic, and kind of repress those emotions because they think in their mind, well, I can teach them about that later. Okay, fine. Uh, the reason you really should do it is to be the best parent for your kid, because in the process of being vulnerable, you're taking care of yourself. And we're never going to be 100% as a parent if we don't take care of ourselves first. We hear this all the time
Hmm.
when we're flying on airplanes,
Right.
right? The flight attendant tells everybody, like, put your oxygen mask on before you help somebody else. So, taking that advice about oxygen masks and prioritize taking care of yourself makes you a better parent. So do what we're talking about in terms of vulnerability and emotion processing. Do that because you want to be an amazing parent to your kid, because you're taking care of yourself. So you're giving 100% of what you can offer.
Absolutely. Fill your cup first, right? So we can
Yeah,
give and like you said, sustain for the next thing, right?
right,
Because we don't always know what that's going to be. We don't know, especially when it comes to health outcomes. We never know, right?
right,
What the next monster under the bed is going to be, and what what we're dealing with. So,
right.
got to make sure that we're equipped, we're ready, we're rested for the next fight. I
Yeah.
imagine in your case, I mean, your daughter, after having had chemo, and I'm assuming made a large recovery, then hit with type 1 diabetes, and that's a whole
Right,
other fight, right?
right. And,
Yeah.
I can say I am grateful that she was an infant during the cancer journey, so doesn't really remember going through
Hmm.
all of that poking and prodding as an infant. I'm sure it had an impact on her, and when I look at her personality, I, kind of guess at what sort of impact it had on her
Hmm.
personality, because she of my kids like is someone who will tell you what's on her
Yeah, she's a
mind.
tiger. Yeah.
And right, and some of that I believe is
Yeah.
because she was poked and prodded at a time when she couldn't talk. But
Hmm.
the her not remembering that was kind of a blessing, because when she got diabetes, it wasn't this kind of uh, reinvigoration of this past kind of medical trauma
Hmm.
of what occurred previously. I, as her mom, knew what, had been on both of these journeys and remembered it. I still remember it like it's yesterday. So her experience as a patient was much different than my experience getting that news as a parent. But the other thing I've had folks ask me about or comment on, they have said, "Well, you're a doctor, so getting those diagnoses, I bet you it was easier because you're a doctor." And I always tell them, it wasn't easier. It wasn't harder. It was just different, because, when I told you about kind of what had happened in the past, I had taken care of kids with neuroblastoma and taken care of lots of kids with diabetes. So when that diagnosis came, I knew in that moment exactly what it meant, which meant my brain was off to the races on anticipating every bad thing that could happen
Mm.
during that journey.
It's like worse than Dr. Google, right? Because
Oh, way worse,
you already
way
have
worse.
a frame
Yeah,
of reference for
uh,
all because you've
yeah,
treated the worst case scenarios, right?
yeah. And,
Yeah.
and unlike Google, that's sometimes wrong, I knew what all the bad outcomes could be
Yeah.
from this journey. So being naive is sometimes helpful, because it can control all of those thoughts when that are creating this emotion of anxiety about the future.
Sure.
Um, but being naive also brings with it this concern, because there's not enough knowledge to really understand what is happening next. So
Hmm.
like I said, it's not easier, it's not harder, it's just different.
Different. Yeah, it's funny you brought that up because as you were talking, I was about to ask you, as a doctor, as a pediatrician, not like a bone doctor even, like but like a pediatrician, like you were already like on that level to a large
Right.
degree, and I was just wondering when you get these types of news, do you what was maybe in terms of like your plan, like what was going through your head in terms of did you feel more equipped to kind of be like cut through the fluff, like these are the things that I know I need to focus on, even with the diabetes, right? Because diabetes, is a huge problem in
Hmm.
society, right?
Hmm.
Um, but even as a therapist, when I'm working with clients, a lot of them have, and I work with mostly adults, but like type 1 diabetes and stuff. And I'll ask them, what's your understanding of how to manage this? And even though they've been to their doctor, even though they've, been somewhat educated on, a lot of them still have a lot of gaps in terms of how do I control this thing and a lot
Hmm.
of misinformation. So do you feel like you were well equipped at that point
Um,
in terms of, because childhood diabetes is a whole kind of different beast, I imagine, than even
so
adult.
type 1 diabetes is much different than type 2. Type 1 can occur in kids and adults, and now more and more adults are getting diagnosed with it, and we understand really those two different types of diabetes are very different diseases. Type 1 is an autoimmune disease. So it's
Mm.
essentially your body, attacking itself. Whereas type 2 is an insulin resistance. Type 1, you cannot treat with diet, exercise. You can only survive if you have insulin dosed correctly. Type 2 diabetes, there's oral medicines. Yeah, some need insulin, but diet and exercise play an important role in controlling type 2. The thing to your question about was I equipped? I don't think I was fully equipped because I don't think you can ever be fully
Mm.
equipped. I had, yes, the medical knowledge, but I didn't have the day to day skills that I never knew I really needed as a mom of a type 1 diabetic. And so it gave me um, perspective, which then kind of changed how I interacted with patients, especially patients who have type 1 diabetes, because I was that now like living this kind of life of understanding blood sugars and understanding how insulin needed to be dosed and how, when you see a high blood sugar on one day, it may be the result of 100 different things, and you're never going to be able to figure out what that one thing is that caused that high blood sugar on that one day. So it gave me perspective. And
Mm.
again, it goes back to how we can take a challenge and turn it into a gift. Like, I'm grateful for her diabetes because it has made me a better mom. It's made me a better physician. But the thing that no one could ever really be fully equipped to have when their child gets diagnosed with something is this grieving process that goes
Mm.
on, because a parent will grieve this life that they thought they were going to have with their child, um, and need to move through all of the stages of grief to get to this point of acceptance, and that they're then able to realize that this new life that they have can be joyful and purposeful and have meaning. But it's a process to get there.
Thank you for bringing that up, right? Nobody's ever prepared, right? We all want our, when we are having children, when we have children, anticipating having children, we imagine in our head, like you said, we have this storybook, picture perfect life. That's what we want to provide for our children. We want them to be in the best health they can, when they're
Right.
born, do they have 10 fingers, 10 toes, you're doing, checking the boxes. You want to make sure that everything's, as it quote should be, or as
Hmm.
you expect it to be, but then life
Right.
gets messy,
Right.
and so you have to recalibrate, I would imagine,
Yes.
to some extent, kind of your expectations, what your role is, what you have control over, what you don't. And like you said, the coming to terms, right, with your vision now,
Right.
not matching up to what reality has presented you,
Yeah.
right? How can parents go through that process of transitioning from their expectation to reality, that grief process? What is that? What are some maybe coping skills, some processes that you've learned that maybe you coach parents on today? Like what does that healing process look like?
Yeah. So I will say the very first thing that I recommend for parents to do is to sit down with an empty sheet of paper and a pen or pencil and just start writing what's on your mind. Uh, and allow yourself to do that on a regular basis. It doesn't need to be for long periods of time. Give yourself, 10-minute blocks of journaling on a daily basis. And by doing that, it serves a couple of purposes. One, it allows your brain to know that, okay, for these 10 minutes every day, that I am going to have this brain dump, and that you will see thoughts will flow onto the paper much easier when you carve out that time and you're consistent with it. The second thing that journaling really does, though, is allows the individual to become much more objective about the things that are on their mind. When you sit there and you write it on a sheet of paper, you can actually look at the thoughts that are floating through your head. And that objectivity allows you to see patterns, like if a thought continues to come up over and over again, or see thoughts that maybe you realize aren't serving you because they're a belief that is leading to an action that keeps you stuck. Or maybe the thoughts tell you that you need to process emotions, but that act of journaling can be incredibly powerful. I'll also tell you a quick story on why I really believe in journaling. I've believed in it for years, and it's part of my daily practice. And I also write 3 things I'm grateful for in my journal every single day, which has been scientifically shown to be able to change the filter that you approach life through when you write 3 things of gratitude every day. But I became a real believer in journaling when I was writing my book. I had this idea years ago to write down the stories of my daughter as an infant and stories of her having type 1 diabetes, because my kids would ask me, "Hey, mom, what happened when you were in the school bathroom diagnosing Kylie with diabetes?" And so I wanted these stories written down so that nobody would ever forget them. Well, I then realized that stories are a way we can teach and help other people. So
Hmm.
that the focus of the book changed, and I knew our stories could help other people on the same journey. The I thought, okay, I will write a story of when my daughter had neuroblastoma, write a story of diabetes, and write a story of a patient that I took care of, all around a chapter theme like fear, overwhelm, guilt. I thought I could crank this out in a weekend because these stories I lived them. Like, this is easy to write. I quickly realized it was going to take me much longer to do, because retelling all of these stories in detail so that the readers could understand what I was thinking and feeling at the time was emotionally exhausting. So it took much longer. But when I
Hmm.
wrote the very last sentence of the book, I closed my laptop and I just started to cry, and knew in that moment that writing all of this down, similar to what I've always taught about journaling, really allowed me to heal some wounds that I uh, had not healed. And so the emotional healing that went on in the process of writing this book for me personally was incredibly rewarding. And I'm very glad that I took on this project.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, doctor, about we all know that journaling is recommended, right, for personal development, for processing emotions, but it really can be transformative
Oh,
and
for sure.
the
Yeah.
way in changing our thought process. And I keep hearing this over and over again by different disciplines that I have on the podcast about how journaling helps us address and challenge our thoughts or limiting thoughts, or gives us a shift in perspective. And so it is very powerful. And it also provides, like you said, a framework history to share with others too,
Right.
about that journey,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's very powerful. Like you said, though, it's not as, you might think it's, even if you're sharing an experience, right, that was emotionally charged, you might think it's simple to whip out. But once you start opening those cans, it's kind of, gets deeper. It's a deep journey of unpacking everything. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think we cognitively, we understand, okay, that was a hard situation. I have closure on it, whatever. But once you start unpacking it again, we can surprise ourselves, right?
Yes.
About
Yeah.
maybe things we had forgotten about, the intensity of what we experienced, lessons learned, right? And so, yeah, all that to say, journaling is a powerful tool.
It is.
Right.
And, people get caught up in having to journal perfectly. Like they need the
Mm-hmm.
perfect prompt in order to do it. And because of that, they don't ever start. I always tell them it doesn't need to be perfect. You don't even need a prompt. Just allow yourself time to write what's on your mind that day. Allow it to be this kind of word dump on a sheet of paper. And it doesn't even need to make sense. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
need to be a story. Like, don't edit yourself when you're doing it, just right.
Right. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be, said, blank sheet of paper. It can be a notebook. It can be typed out, whatever,
Right.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Yeah. I want to do more journaling this year. I know it's powerful. That's why I actually created a gratitude journal, right? Digital kind of thing you can type on or print out, write on, just because I know I like to give it to my listeners and stuff, because I know it's a powerful tool,
So powerful.
and everybody needs, I think, sometimes a jumping off point, but sometimes if you're not in the habit, like you said, it does feel like it needs to be perfect. Like, oh, if I'm going to start journaling, I don't know whether I should journal with prompts, or I don't know if I should journal with specific intention, or if it's more like a diary, but I think it doesn't really matter, right?
It doesn't matter. And you may even change over time, but carving out that time to spend just a few minutes doing it will allow you to start somewhere and change the process over time.
Mhm.
But carving out that time goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that it goes back to self care
Mhm.
and really prioritizing taking care of your own emotional health as a parent so that you can be 100% for your kid. That's really what it comes down to, is knowing that journaling is one of those things that make you a more resilient person. Do it as therapy for yourself on a regular basis to be able to accomplish your parenting role with ease. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be your best effort.
Wonderful. And it sounds like I don't drive by that too fast, because you just touched on something really important, since we are talking about supporting parents, making time, carving out time, protecting time for self-care, reflection time,
Right.
to decompress, right, is so important. And it's amazing what 10 minutes a day will do.
Yeah. And,
How simple
it's
and
so
effective.
funny that anytime, folks hear people talk about self-care, they're like, I don't have time to go to the spa. Well, and don't get me wrong, like a good spa day is great, but that is not what I'm referring to when I talk about self-care. Like self-care just needs to be a few minutes out of your day, whether it be to journal, which your audience already heard my rant about how awesome journaling is. Um, to do some exercise, like just walking around the block and getting sunshine, to take some deep breaths and just pause and be in the present moment and focus on hearing the birds outside.
Hmm.
Um, all of those things, that's what self-care is. Yep,
Absolutely.
a good spa day is great, but that a spa day every now and again isn't going to help as much as a few minutes out of every day to take
And
care
that's
of your mind.
exactly what I try and practice when I'm feeling tight or your body knows when you've been neglecting to take a break and decompress. And so what I'll do is if I don't have a lot of time, yeah, I mean, the gym's great, but stepping outside in the sun for 5 minutes and listening to the birds, watching the butterflies, pet the dog
Yeah,
goes a long way.
it goes a
Absolutely.
long way. Yeah.
And you were talking about how that fosters resilience or is actually part of the equation for resilience. Could you talk a little bit more about that? I know you have a formula, the 4 C's of resilience, right?
Right. So I teach parents about what I refer to as the 4 C's of resilience. And this kind of goes back to what we've been alluding to. It's the understanding that circumstances that we have in our lives are neither positive nor negative. It's really the thoughts that float around in our brain that label those circumstances as positive or negative. Those thoughts then lead to emotions. The emotions that we feel lead us to act a certain way, and those actions give us the results that we have in our lives. So, if we want to be resilient, the thing we can truly influence is our thoughts. And the 4 C's are the first one being consciousness. So we need to do what we were talking about with journaling and really be conscious of the thoughts that our brain is offering us. The second C is curiosity. So once we get those thoughts down on paper, really objectively looking at them and figuring out, does that thought serve me? Is it truly creating the emotions that are going to lead to the actions that are going to lead to the results that I want in my life? Why do I have that thought? Where's that thought coming from? Is that thought true? Is it not true? Like, why did I create this story? All that curiosity is the second C of resilience. The third and fourth C is courage and commitment. And that's the courage to change a thought and the commitment to believe a new belief. And so taking that first step and saying, you know what? I want to believe something different. I am going to change that my thought about that is an important step because we're never going to change if we don't have the courage to take that first step. But it's really the commitment to change that brings on the positive effects of that. Because just like anything else, that we need to practice something that is new and different. So having the commitment to practicing it is the final C that is really the foundation to becoming resilient.
Wow. It's a great framework, right? Because we need to commit the time, We need to do the exploration, the self-work. And then once we've identified what that shift is, then we find something, a touch point, as I like to say, or
Right.
something, some actionable, some behavior that we can then, real life application to that concept or that shift, right? That new belief,
Right. Hmm.
right? How do we act this out now in our lives
Right.
and work that muscle?
Right. And
Yeah.
it I've said this earlier, like it's not quick, like it takes work. But with time, you get quicker and better about it. So if you've decided to change a thought because it wasn't serving you in the way that you wanted a thought to, that you may catch yourself when you're thinking that thought again that's not serving you in the moment. Um, but it takes the realization and the commitment to really wanting to change it, to really being able to catch yourself in the moment.
Thank you. So that's definitely part of firming up our foundation as parents, resilience, right? Because life is hard. Parenting is very difficult. Um, Wonderful. Parenting is wonderful, but it doesn't come without its challenges, right? And so
Absolutely.
resilience is a must, right? If we
Yep.
if we want to kind of weather the storms, we need to kind of know the process of that deep work in
Yes.
order to firm up. So that's kind of the one vertical, right? Is the work we can do on ourselves. But what about advocating, right? As
Hmm.
parents, how do we advocate for ourselves and our children when it comes to health issues with our children? Do you have
Yeah.
any tips on that?
Well, anytime someone says the word advocate, immediately people think about arguing. And
Hmm.
I just want folks to understand that being a great advocate doesn't mean that you're arguing with people. It means that you are organized and curious and have courage to voice an opinion. Um, so let me kind of break that down just a little bit. Being organized, I teach parents that before a health appointment or before a school appointment, write down everything that they want to discuss or questions that they want resolved. And that list serves two purposes. One, it serves a purpose of making sure you get everything you need to get out of that appointment. But the second purpose is if emotions are making it so that our mind isn't focusing on the conversation at hand, we have that paper to refer to so that we know, okay, this is also what I was thinking about. And so it can make the parent kind of objective and distance themselves from their concerns and worries, which then allows them to present that concern in a very non-emotional way. So being organized is super important first step to advocating. The second thing is I said being curious. So this is going into an appointment, whether it be medical or educational, and realizing that everyone participating is human. That means a doctor is not on a pedestal, that they're human just like you and I. Going into an appointment thinking somebody is on a pedestal can be dangerous because it impacts somebody's courageousness or somebody's ability to voice a differing opinion. So understanding they're all human, and with being human, that means they can have good days and bad days. They can be right some of the time, they can be wrong some of the time. But the curiosity comes in to where if the individual you're having the appointment with is presenting a different treatment plan that you didn't really think of or agree with, don't attack them back with, you know what? I don't think that should be the right plan. That approach it with curiosity, and you can even play a game with your mind and say, okay, I know this person isn't 100% wrong. Let me find that 10% that's right that I
Mm.
was unaware of before. And by playing that game with your brain, it focuses your brain in a way that is helpful when you're trying to advocate for yourself or for somebody else. And then the final thing is courage, that having and speaking a voice can be challenging sometimes when we feel like we're not on equal terms with someone. So, really doing the work to know that as a parent, you do have great self worth, that you are the best parent to your child, which means that you know your kid. And um, that can help with bringing courage to the table when you're talking about advocating.
Wow, all wonderful, wonderful tips, advice, right? Being organized, meaning that if we put our questions on paper, bullet point some things we would definitely want to bounce off of the professional, right? The doctor, etc., the educator, because we get into our emotions, right?
Right,
We're parents, and nothing gets more personal than our children,
right,
and it's hard to be objective sometimes, and it would be expected that we're gonna sometimes lose our train of thought or forget something we wanted to check up on. So having a list of questions, Q&A stuff that can come in really handy, right?
yeah,
When you're in those appointments, definitely. And then being courageous and, like you said, the not having them on a pedestal, right?
right,
So addressing them as human to human, right? With
yeah,
respect, but human to human, and being like, don't necessarily want to shy away from asking questions because
right,
of the power differential,
right,
perspective or anything like that. But also being courageous to ask some of the questions, right? And understand there's no such thing as a silly question,
right. Yeah, the
right?
only silly questions are those that are
Aren't
never
asked,
asked. Yeah.
right? That's what we
But
always say.
the other thing that I like to remind people of is that sometimes a diagnosis can't be made during one visit.
Oh, true.
And
Yeah.
that can be very frustrating to parents sometimes. So, in those moments, I always teach parents, you know what? It's okay if a diagnosis isn't made. But when you leave that office, if the doctor's saying, I'm not sure what's wrong, then say, okay, I get it. You're not sure. In my gut as a parent, I feel like something's not right. Can you tell me what are things that I should be looking for that will help you as a doctor with making this diagnosis? What are things that you want to know about quickly? Or when should I make the next appointment to tell you how things are going? So, all of those types of guidance can be very helpful for parents as they're maneuvering through a frustrating situation where a diagnosis hasn't been made yet.
Thank you for that. That's very good, I think, too, like getting the follow-up, right?
Right. Yeah.
Commitment, showing investment, but also expectation, and
Hmm.
having to be part a mutual kind of agreement, kind of
Yeah.
cause, right? That you have skin in the game, and you want your commitment on both sides about what our role is as parents, right? How can
Right.
I follow up? When I should I follow up? What should I be looking for? What are your key performance indicators, so to speak? Yeah.
Right.
What are
Right.
you as a doctor looking for in terms of symptoms, and when should I call you? And because as parents, as soon as we get home, it's like, oh, I wish I'd asked that. Oh, should I call the doctor? Should I call their answering service? Or
Right.
is this silly of me? And we start having all this stuff. I don't know about you, but I have all this stuff something in my head.
Yeah.
Kind of like, oh, do I bother? When is you start to jump on Google? When should I call the doctor? When my
Right.
9-year-old has. So it's always good to kind of, if you have the opportunity to ask those things up front, if
Right.
you spend a few minutes to plan ahead the best we can, some of
Yeah,
these things will save us anxiety later, for sure.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, and then I was also wondering, and you already kind of touched on this, but how can parents maybe get ahead of feeling overwhelmed, or when they are feeling overwhelmed, how do we kind of reel it back
Yeah.
in your
So,
experience?
eh, it goes to what we were talking about before with being able to manage our mind and really see in those moments of overwhelm, first realizing we're overwhelmed, labeling it
Hmm.
as such, and then trying to figure out what thought is leading us to feeling overwhelmed, and thinking, well, do I really need to believe that thought, or is it something I can let go or change?
Hmm.
So, really o- work on understanding thoughts and mindset can really help with feeling overwhelmed. But the thing we didn't touch on that also helps with overwhelm is finding your people
Ah.
and creating a good support network is absolutely important for because overwhelm can oftentimes in the parenting world lead to isolation, and
Hmm.
then your overwhelm gets worse and then you become more isolated, so it becomes this
Hmm.
vicious cycle. But finding your people and being able to have friends or family that you can depend on, but also finding groups where you can vent to or who understand what you're going through as a mom or a dad is pretty important. There's been lots of work about the power of community and
Hmm.
how um, our lots of our health problems are due to loneliness, and the importance of finding community when you're struggling with challenges is critical in learning and growing from these challenges we're faced with.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that, because we know that peer support is important. We know that community is important. We see this in all the research,
Yeah,
um, not just as parents, but as people,
yeah,
right? I mean, there's a whole kick on blue zones right now, which I'm a little obsessed with. But blue zones, the centenarians, people who live to be 100 and
right,
longer.
yeah,
What's the through line between these communities? There's like 5 populations in the world, and
yep,
one of the big pillars there is community and
yep.
peer support and socialization. And how much more important is that than when we're going through some trying times? But it's like that saying, dig a well before you're thirsty,
Yeah.
right? When is the best time to plant a tree? 30 years ago. But when's the
Yes.
next best time? Now, right? All of those catchphrases about the importance. And so it's not always as easy as, Googling, support groups for such and such for parents. And there's, finding something within striking distance of your house, right? But one of the beautiful things we have gained from the tragedy of the pandemic is access to online support
Yes. Yeah.
groups, Zoom, whatever. And so that's
But
definitely been a catalyst, right?
yeah, the other thing though that I will say about that is um, parents oftentimes have a lot of trouble asking for help.
Mm,
And I use myself as an example. I stunk at asking for help when my daughter had cancer. I stunk at it because I, throughout my childhood, wanted and dreamed about being a mom. And I felt like if I was going to ask for help, it meant I was failing at this job that I
mm,
dreamt about forever. So I have learned that, asking for help is not failure. Like that's strength because you're evaluating what is on your plate. And by being able to have the courage to say, I need help, that is a sign of strength, not weakness. But, the other big thing that I always remind people, asking for help, you're giving somebody else a gift, that we all want to serve each other, and offering them the opportunity to be able to reap the benefits and feelings and emotions that go along with serving you is a gift that you can give somebody else. So when you reframe it as it's a sign of strength and you're giving somebody a gift, it becomes much easier to ask for help.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, right? Because I'm sure so many parents feel that way. Like, I should have this all figured out. If
Right.
I ask for help, that means I'm weak, or that means I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm doing, or how will I be received? Will I be judged?
Right.
Um, I'm not used to talking, I'm not used to talking about things, behind
Right.
closed doors and all that stuff. So it's a sign of strength. Going back to what you were talking about earlier in terms of one of the aspects of resilience is courage, right?
Right.
And fear is kind of a prerequisite for courage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Yep.
that just makes us human. But asking for help, finding, like you said, the right people is important. There's something I think of as the proximity pitfall, right? I talk to my clients a lot about is there's a propensity to reach out to the people who are in closest proximity to us for support. The problem with that alone is that the people who are in the closest proximity are not necessarily the most prepared people or
Mm-hmm.
adequate people to provide the level of support that we need,
Mm-hmm.
because they may not have the frame of reference. They may not have
Right.
the shared experience. And so find our people, find our tribe, and you can find those people for specific problems,
Yeah.
right? As we know, hence a support group, right? Or
Right.
educational group or whatever, or coaching,
Right. Yeah.
right? Hence you being on the podcast, right? You started off, it sounds like, looking to support other doctors and teaching them about the nuances of this population and supporting parents. And then you kind of altered course a little bit to focus more on helping parents directly, right?
Right.
And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a need there, and you're doing wonderful work, being that support for parents, being that support for other doctors, and putting your resources out there. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh,
And
thank
you're a living example that there are resources,
Yeah.
for parents.
There are.
There are. So that being said, I want to direct our audience to the wonderful work you're doing via your website, the books. For anyone who's not sure where to find you, they can go over to maureenmichelemd.com, and I'll make sure I tie up all of those links in the show notes for you. And your website here is very well laid out. This is your book, Reclaiming Life, a guide for parents of chronically ill children. You said that's on Amazon, right?
It is on Amazon.
Okay.
Yep.
Easy to find.
Easy to
All
find.
right. Easy to find. I'm an audiobook fan. You don't have an audiobook by chance, do you?
I do have an audiobook.
What?
Yeah.
Perfect.
You can listen to it now if you're on Audible or Spotify or whatever your platform of choice is. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I know it's an extra box to check, and a big one at that. But thank you, because I'm a fan of audiobooks.
Yes.
Right? So thank you so much. And you've been featured on many podcasts if people want to check you out there. And of course, there's a way to get in touch with you through the website.
Yes.
And you're on social as well, right?
Yep.
Instagram.
Absolutely.
And so forth.
Yep.
So I will be sure to tie up all of that in the show notes. Anything I'm missing?
I don't think so. I appreciate being here. Would love to hear from anyone in your audience that wants to chat more about the things that we discussed today, or just needs a little bit of help. And I promise the courage to take that step to chat with me is not scary. It's just me.
Well, I really appreciate you being on, and you are very approachable, and you are very human, right?
That's
and like
right.
you said, it's easy to put doctors on a pedestal because you do great work and you invest an incredible amount of time and energy to get into that field in the first place. And so, mad respect.
Thank you.
But Having done pre-med myself, I know. Just that barrier of entry is so high. It's one of the reasons I pivoted. No, just kidding. It's it's a lot of investment on your part, and so I really appreciate the work you're doing, and then to even expand beyond, right, the clinical setting and to helping the parents in the trenches. That's just a wonderful work you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And you're always welcome back on, Doctor, if you want to share how things are going, if you want to promote any other books, it's always an open door. So appreciate that.
Thank you. This has been super fun conversation.
Likewise. And with that, you have a great week, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.